There is a moment that happens to so many people after 60. It comes quietly, usually at night. You lie down after a long day, and just as your body begins to settle into the stillness, you feel it. That familiar ache in your knees, that deep, stubborn throb along your lower back, or perhaps that burning tightness in your hands that no amount of stretching seems to release. You reach for the pillow and shift your weight, hoping a different position will bring some relief. Sometimes it does. Often it doesn't. And so you lie there in the darkness, wondering, not for the first time, whether this is just what getting older is supposed to feel like. Whether the rest of your years are going to be lived in this quiet conversation with pain. I want to talk to you tonight about something that changes that story. Something that has been quietly studied in some of the world's most respected research institutions and is only now beginning to receive the attention it has always deserved. What I want to tell you about is not a pill. It is not a surgical procedure. It is not something that requires a prescription, a hospital visit, or a long, confusing list of side effects. It is something you can hold in the palm of your hand, something that comes from nature itself. Something that, when applied to your skin consistently, especially at night, begins a process so powerful, so deeply healing, that scientists who study it are genuinely amazed by what it can do to pain, to inflammation, and to the aging body. But before we get there, I need you to understand something fundamental, something that changes the way you see pain entirely. Because most people think of pain as the problem. They think, if I can just stop the pain, everything will be fine. But pain is not the problem. Pain is the signal. It is your body's most urgent form of communication, a distress flare sent up from deep within your tissues, your joints, your nerves, saying, something here needs attention. And what almost always sits at the root of that signal, what modern science has confirmed again and again, is a process called chronic inflammation. Inflammation itself is not the villain. That is important to understand. In its original healthy form, inflammation is one of the most heroic things your body does. When you cut your finger, when you catch a cold, when bacteria enter your bloodstream, inflammation rushes in like a first responder, flooding the area with healing proteins, immune cells, and repair signals. Within days, sometimes hours, the job is done and the inflammation retreats. That is acute inflammation, and it is a miracle of biology. The problem, the real, modern, deeply damaging problem, is what happens when that same process refuses to turn off. Chronic inflammation is different. It is quieter, slower. It burns at a low, continuous level inside the body, sometimes for years, sometimes for decades, without you ever seeing a visible wound or feeling a sharp, obvious injury. It moves through the bloodstream like an invisible fire, quietly damaging the lining of blood vessels, eroding the cartilage between joints, fraying nerve endings, disrupting hormones, clouding the mind, and making every single morning feel harder than the last. Researchers studying aging now believe that chronic inflammation is not just a symptom of getting older. They believe it is one of the primary drivers of aging itself. They even have a name for it, inflammaging, the slow, steady inflammatory fire that accelerates biological aging and makes the body feel decades older than it truly is. And here is where it gets personal. Because the pain so many people over 60 experience, the stiffness in the morning, the aching joints, the burning in the muscles, the heaviness in the legs, the swelling around the ankles. So much of that pain traces back to this one source, to inflammation that has taken root in the body and refuses to let go. Which means that addressing inflammation is not just about comfort. It is not just about getting through the day with less pain. Addressing inflammation is one of the most profound things you can do for your long-term health, your mental clarity, your heart, your immune system, and the quality of every single year ahead of you. So let us talk about the oil. Let us talk about what it actually is and why the skin, that remarkable, living, breathing organ that covers every inch of your body, turns out to be one of the most powerful doorways through which healing can enter. The skin is extraordinary. Most people think of it simply as a covering, a wrapper, the outer surface of who we are. But scientists who study dermal biology see something completely different. They see an organ, the largest organ in the human body, that is alive with nerve endings, blood vessels, immune cells, and receptor sites that respond to the molecules it encounters with breathtaking specificity. The skin does not simply sit there passively. It communicates. It absorbs. It translates chemical messages from the outside world into biological responses deep inside the body. And when you apply the right substances to it consistently, substances that carry molecules capable of crossing the skin barrier and entering the bloodstream, you are not just moisturizing. You are delivering medicine to the body through one of its most responsive surfaces. This is the foundation of what scientists call transdermal delivery, and it is behind some of the most effective therapeutic approaches in modern medicine. Nicotine patches work this way. Hormone replacement patches work this way. Pain relief patches work this way. The skin, under the right conditions, is a remarkably effective gateway. And the oil we are going to talk about tonight takes full advantage of that gateway in a way that is both ancient in its origins and cutting edge in what science now understands about why it works. The oil is castor oil. And if that name sounds familiar, perhaps your grandmother kept a bottle of it in the medicine cabinet. Perhaps your mother once pressed a warm cloth soaked in it against your side when you had a stomachache as a child. Then you already know, on some level, that this is not a new idea. Castor oil has been used for thousands of years across dozens of cultures, from ancient Egypt to Ayurvedic medicine in India, from traditional Chinese healing to folk remedies passed down through generations of American families. For most of that history, people used it intuitively, knowing it worked but not fully understanding why. Now we know why. And the scientific explanation is extraordinary. Castor oil is derived from the seeds of the Ricinus communis plant, a striking tropical plant that grows across much of the world's warmer regions. When those seeds are cold pressed, meaning extracted without heat, which preserves their molecular integrity, they produce an oil that is unlike almost any other oil in nature. The reason is a single molecule. It is called ricinoleic acid, and it makes up approximately 90% of the fatty acid content of pure castor oil. No other oil found in nature contains ricinoleic acid in anything close to that concentration. It is essentially unique to castor oil. And what ricinoleic acid does inside the human body, once it crosses the skin and enters the system, is what has researchers genuinely excited. Ricinoleic acid binds to a specific receptor in the human body called EP3, a prostaglandin receptor that plays a central role in regulating pain and inflammatory responses. When ricinoleic acid activates this receptor, it does not stimulate inflammation. It does not amplify pain signals. It does the opposite. It quiets them. It gently dampens the inflammatory cascade, reducing the production of prostaglandins, the very molecules responsible for the throbbing, aching, burning sensations that so many people over 60 have come to accept as their daily reality. One clinical study published in the Journal of Naturopathic Medicine found that castor oil packs applied to the body produced significant reductions in pain and inflammation in patients with knee osteoarthritis, conditions that affect millions of older Americans every single day. But that is only the beginning of the story, because while the anti-inflammatory properties of ricinoleic acid are compelling on their own, castor oil does something else to the skin and the tissues beneath it that is perhaps even more remarkable. Something that connects directly to the body's own healing intelligence in a way that most people have never heard about. There is a system in your body that runs parallel to your bloodstream, just beneath the skin's surface, winding through your tissues, your organs, and your muscles like an invisible river network. It is called the lymphatic system. Most people know about the blood circulatory system, the heart pumping blood through arteries and veins, delivering oxygen and nutrients, carrying away waste. Far fewer people know about the lymphatic system, even though it is equally critical to your health. The lymphatic system is your body's internal drainage and immune highway. It collects fluid, waste products, toxins, and immune cells from the tissues and carries them toward the lymph nodes, where they are filtered and processed. When the lymphatic system is working well, the body stays clean, clear, and resilient. When the lymphatic system becomes sluggish, as it often does with age, with inactivity, and with chronic inflammation, toxins and waste products begin to accumulate in the tissues, compounding inflammation, increasing pain, and slowing the body's ability to heal itself. Here is what makes castor oil remarkable in this regard. Research suggests that transdermal application of castor oil, particularly when used consistently and applied with gentle massage, stimulates lymphatic circulation. It gets the river moving again. It helps the body clear out the accumulated biological debris that contributes to that heavy, achy, inflamed feeling so many older adults know all too well. Some researchers believe this lymphatic, stimulating effect may be one of the primary reasons why castor oil has such a long and consistent history of relieving not just pain, but also that deep fatigue, that morning stiffness, that sense of the body feeling stuck and heavy that so many people struggle to describe but instantly recognize. And there is one more dimension to this story. One more layer that makes what happens when you apply castor oil to your skin at night genuinely different from anything you might expect. Something that has to do not with inflammation, not with the lymphatic system, but with something even more fundamental. Something that happens deep in the tissues while you sleep, during those quiet, dark hours when the body does its most extraordinary work. Tonight, when you close your eyes, something remarkable is going to unfold inside you. And what you apply to your skin just before that moment may determine how deeply and how completely that healing can reach. What happens next in this story is something most people have never been told, and once you understand it, you will never think about your bedtime routine the same way again. Sleep is not simply rest. That is the first thing I want you to truly understand, because it changes everything about how you see those nighttime hours. Sleep is when the body shifts into its most active healing mode. While your conscious mind drifts into stillness, your biology ignites. The brain begins clearing out metabolic waste through a system called the glymphatic system, a kind of overnight cleansing cycle that flushes toxic proteins from neural tissue, proteins whose accumulation has been linked to cognitive decline and memory loss. Your immune system releases its most powerful repair proteins. Your muscles rebuild their microscopic tears from the day's activity. Your hormones recalibrate. Your inflammatory markers, when your body is given the right conditions, begin to drop. Sleep, in every measurable biological sense, is the most powerful healing state the human body enters. This is why applying castor oil to the skin at night is not arbitrary. It is strategic. It is time to align with your body's own deepest healing cycles. Because as you sleep, as blood flow shifts, as tissues relax, as the lymphatic system continues its quiet nightly work, the resinolic acid in castor oil continues to cross the skin barrier and enter the circulation. It continues to dampen inflammatory signals in the joints and muscles. It continues to encourage lymphatic drainage. And it does this during the exact window of time when your body is already doing everything in its power to heal, restore, and regenerate. You are not fighting your biology, you are working with it. Now let me tell you something about what chronic pain actually does to sleep. Because this is a relationship that most people feel intuitively, but rarely see described clearly. Pain disrupts sleep. That much is obvious. The aching in the hip makes it hard to find a comfortable position. The throbbing in the knees surfaces the moment the distractions of the day fall away. The deep burning in the lower back that was somehow manageable at noon becomes impossible to ignore at midnight. But here is what is less obvious, and what makes the cycle so cruel. Disrupted sleep worsens inflammation. When the body does not get sufficient, uninterrupted sleep, it produces higher levels of pro-inflammatory cytokines, signaling proteins that amplify inflammatory responses throughout the body. Less sleep means more inflammation. More inflammation means more pain. More pain means less sleep. It is a loop that deepens with every passing year if nothing intervenes to break it. Castor oil, applied consistently at night, begins to gently interrupt that cycle, not by sedating you, not by numbing you, but by addressing one of the root conditions that keeps the loop spinning. As inflammation decreases over time, as the body's internal environment becomes less agitated, sleep quality tends to improve naturally. And as sleep improves, the body's own anti-inflammatory mechanisms become stronger, further reducing pain, further calming the system. This is what healing looks like when it is working from the inside out rather than simply masking symptoms from the outside in. Let me paint you a picture of what this looks like in real life. Imagine a woman, let us call her Margaret. Margaret is 67 years old, a retired school teacher from Ohio. She spent decades on her feet, carrying the physical and emotional weight of 30 students at a time, year after year. By the time she retired, her knees told the story of every standing lesson, every hallway walk, every morning arrival, and every afternoon dismissal. She had tried over the counter pain relievers. She had tried compression wraps. She had done physical therapy twice. Some things helped a little. Nothing helped enough. Most nights, she woke at 2 or 3 in the morning, the pain pulling her up from whatever dream she'd been floating in, leaving her sitting on the edge of the bed in the dark, wondering how she was going to make it through another day. A friend told Margaret about castor oil. She was skeptical. The way any reasonable person is skeptical when something sounds too simple, too old-fashioned, too much like a home remedy from a different century. But she tried it. She warmed a small amount between her palms and massaged it gently into both knees every night before bed, covering them with a thin cloth to let the oil work through the night. She did this for 2 weeks before she noticed anything. Then, one morning, she realized she had slept through the night. Not just dozed, actually slept uninterrupted from 10 at night until 6 in the morning. It had been years since that had happened. By the end of the first month, the morning stiffness that had become her unwilling alarm clock was noticeably softer. She still had days that were harder than others. But the relentless quality of the pain, that constant background grinding, had changed. Margaret's story is not unique. It echoes in the experiences of thousands of people who have rediscovered this ancient remedy through modern understanding. And what I want you to notice is not just that it worked, but how it worked. Slowly, gently, cumulatively, building on itself night after night. This is not a story about a dramatic overnight cure. It is a story about restoration. About giving the body consistent support so that its own extraordinary healing intelligence can do what it was always designed to do. Now let us go deeper, because there is a dimension of what castor oil does that goes beyond the joint and muscle pain most people immediately associate with it. Let us talk about something that affects virtually every person over 60, but that most people do not connect to inflammation at all. Let us talk about the skin itself, about what is happening to the skin as the years pass, and why the nightly ritual of applying castor oil to the surface of your body is not just about what lies underneath, but about the extraordinary organ you are touching directly. As the body ages, the skin undergoes changes that are both visible and invisible. The visible changes, the lines, the shift in texture, the loss of that certain luminosity that characterized younger skin, are things most people notice in the mirror. But the invisible changes are more consequential. Collagen production slows. Collagen is the structural protein that gives skin its firmness, its bounce, its ability to spring back after being pressed or stretched. After the age of 25, the body produces roughly 1% less collagen every year. By the time a person reaches their 60s, that accumulated loss is significant. The skin becomes thinner, more fragile, more prone to dryness and irritation. The barrier function? The skin's ability to lock in moisture and keep irritants out becomes less efficient. And beneath that thinning skin, the microvasculature, the tiny network of blood vessels that feeds the skin's layers, also becomes less robust, meaning nutrients and oxygen reach the skin's deepest layers more slowly. Castor oil addresses this aging process in ways that are both direct and indirect. Directly, the molecular structure of ricinoleic acid allows it to penetrate not just the outer layer of the skin, the epidermis, but to move deeper into the dermis, the layer where collagen fibers live, where fibroblasts produce new structural proteins, where the real architecture of the skin is maintained. Research has shown that ricinoleic acid can stimulate fibroblast activity, meaning it encourages the very cells responsible for collagen production to become more active. This is not cosmetic vanity. This is tissue integrity. Skin that maintains better structural integrity is more protective, more effective as a barrier against infection and environmental stress, and more capable of communicating with the immune and nervous systems beneath it. Indirectly, the anti-inflammatory action of castor oil benefits the skin enormously, because inflammation does not spare the skin. Many of the inflammatory cytokines that circulate in the bloodstream during states of chronic inflammation actively degrade collagen, disrupt the skin's moisture barrier, and contribute to conditions like eczema, psoriasis, chronic dryness, and the kind of sensitive, reactive skin that so many older adults develop without ever understanding why. By reducing systemic inflammation over time, regular castor oil application creates a biological environment in which the skin, like the joints, like the muscles, like the nervous system, has a better chance to repair and renew itself. There is something else castor oil does to the skin that I find particularly beautiful from a scientific standpoint, and it has to do with circulation. The gentle massage required to apply the oil, even a few minutes of unhurried, intentional pressure and movement, stimulates blood flow to the surface tissues. This is not trivial. For older adults, peripheral circulation can become sluggish, meaning the extremities, the feet, the ankles, the hands, the knees, may receive less blood flow than they need for optimal tissue health. Improved local circulation means better delivery of oxygen and nutrients to those tissues. It means faster clearance of metabolic waste. It means a warmer, more responsive, better nourished surface beneath the skin. Some researchers believe this circulatory benefit alone accounts for a significant portion of the pain relief that people consistently report after regular castor oil application, because many types of chronic pain are worsened by poor local circulation, by tissues that are literally under-nourished and oxygen-deprived. But here is the thread I want to pull on next, because it leads somewhere that will genuinely surprise you. We have talked about joints. We have talked about muscles. We have talked about skin and collagen and circulation. But there is one more system in the body that chronic inflammation attacks with particular determination. One more system whose health determines, more than almost anything else, how long you live and how well you live. It is the system that I believe holds the deepest key to understanding why something as simple as a nightly oil ritual can have effects that reach far beyond where you apply it. What I am going to tell you next connects the surface of your skin to the deepest organ in your chest. And when you understand how that connection works, and what inflammation has been quietly doing to it, you will understand why the people who study this the most carefully say with quiet conviction, what you do every night before you sleep may matter far more than you have ever been told. There is an organ in your chest that never rests. From the moment it began beating, long before you drew your first breath, somewhere in the quiet dark of your earliest weeks of existence, it has never once stopped. It beats 100,000 times a day. It pumps roughly 2,000 gallons of blood through 60,000 miles of blood vessels every single day of your life. It does this without your instruction, without your awareness, without a single conscious command from you. It is the most tireless, most devoted, most extraordinary organ in the human body, and chronic inflammation, that slow, invisible fire we have been talking about, is one of its greatest enemies. Heart disease remains the leading cause of death in the United States, not just for the very old, for people in their 60s, for people in their 50s, for people who are active, who eat reasonably well, who take their medications, who do everything they believe they are supposed to do, and still find themselves sitting in a cardiologist's office, looking at a scan of their coronary arteries with a growing sense of disbelief. How did this happen? How did things get this far without warning? The answer, in so many of those cases, comes back to the same word we have been circling all night: inflammation. The connection between chronic inflammation and cardiovascular disease is now one of the most thoroughly documented relationships in all of modern medicine. Inflammation damages the inner lining of blood vessels, the endothelium, that single cell, thick layer that keeps your arteries smooth, flexible, and open. When the endothelium is inflamed, it becomes sticky, rough, reactive. Immune cells begin to accumulate in arterial walls. Cholesterol particles become trapped in those inflamed walls, oxidize, and form the plaques that gradually narrow the passage through which blood must flow. Over years and decades, this inflammatory arterial damage quietly builds until one day something happens. A plaque ruptures, a clot forms, blood flow stops, and a person's world changes forever in the space of a single heartbeat. This is why managing inflammation is not just about feeling less pain in your knees. It is not just about sleeping better or moving more easily. It is about the long-term integrity of the cardiovascular system. It is about protecting the vessel that carries everything: oxygen, nutrients, immune cells, the very signals of life itself, to every tissue in your body. And here is where the story of castor oil and the heart connects in a way that is both biologically compelling and genuinely hopeful. The resinolic acid in castor oil, that extraordinary molecule we have been discussing all evening, has demonstrated vasoactive properties in research settings. This means it has the capacity to influence the tone and behavior of blood vessels. Studies have shown that resinolic acid can support what scientists call endothelial function, the health and responsiveness of that critical inner lining of blood vessels. By reducing local and systemic inflammatory signaling, by supporting lymphatic clearance of metabolic waste, by improving microcirculation in the tissues where it is applied, regular castor oil use creates conditions that are friendlier to vascular health, not a replacement for medical care. This must always be said clearly, but a meaningful, evidence-informed addition to the daily habits that protect the cardiovascular system over time. There is something else that happens when you establish a nightly ritual of applying castor oil. Something that operates not at the level of biochemistry, but at the level of the nervous system. And that has profound implications for both the heart and the inflammatory process itself. When you take 10 minutes before bed to warm oil between your hands, to apply it slowly and intentionally to your skin, to breathe, to be present in your own body, you activate what neuroscientists call the parasympathetic nervous system, the rest and digest mode, the counterbalance to the fight or flight response that so many older Americans are living in almost perpetually without realizing it. Chronic stress and chronic inflammation are not merely parallel problems. They are deeply intertwined. The stress hormone cortisol, when chronically elevated, directly promotes inflammatory signaling throughout the body. And the modern life of an older American, managing health anxieties, navigating financial concerns after retirement, worrying about children and grandchildren, processing the losses that inevitably accumulate with age, is not a stress-free life, no matter how blessed it may be in other ways. The nervous system often carries more than we consciously realize. And a body whose nervous system is running on low-level alert all day, every day, is a body whose inflammatory systems are being continuously stimulated. The simple act of a nightly oil ritual, the warmth, the touch, the breath, the deliberate slowing down, is a form of nervous system medicine. It signals to the body it is safe now. You can rest, you can heal. This is not metaphorical. The parasympathetic activation that occurs during gentle, intentional self-massage measurably reduces cortisol levels, lowers heart rate, decreases blood pressure, and reduces the production of pro-inflammatory cytokines. You are not just moisturizing your skin. You are, in a very real biological sense, turning down the inflammatory volume in your entire body through the simple act of being still, being warm, and being present with yourself. Let me tell you about something I think about often. There is a kind of wisdom that lives in old things, in practices that have persisted across thousands of years and dozens of cultures, not because people were naive or superstitious, but because experience accumulated across generations and confirmed, again and again, that something worked. Castor oil is one of those things. It appears in the ancient texts of Egypt, where it was used to soothe inflamed eyes and skin conditions. It appears in the Ebers Papyrus, one of the oldest medical documents ever discovered, dating back more than 3,000 years. It is woven into the fabric of Ayurvedic medicine as a therapeutic oil of the highest order, used to reduce Vata imbalance, what ancient healers described as the dry, cold, wind-like energy that manifests in the body as stiffness, pain, anxiety, and fragility. It was carried in the medicine bags of Native American healers. It lined the shelves of American pharmacies well into the 20th century, before the pharmaceutical revolution shifted everyone's attention to newer, more patentable molecules. What modern science has done, what the researchers studying ricinoleic acid and transdermal absorption and lymphatic stimulation have done, is not discover something new. They have explained something ancient. They have taken thousands of years of human experience and given it the language of biology, of receptor pharmacology, of measurable clinical outcomes. And what they have found, again and again, is that the people who came before us were not wrong. They simply did not have the vocabulary to tell us what they already knew. Now let us talk about how to do this correctly, because the quality of the oil matters enormously, and the method of application makes a meaningful difference in how much benefit you receive. The castor oil that belongs in a healing ritual is not the refined, deodorized, chemical-treated product that fills the cheap plastic bottles on discount store shelves. What you are looking for, and this detail is not small, is organic, cold-pressed, hexane-free castor oil. Cold-pressed means the oil was extracted without heat, which preserves the full concentration and molecular integrity of the ricinoleic acid and the other bioactive compounds in the oil. Hexane-free means no petroleum-based chemical solvents were used in the extraction process. Organic means the plant was grown without synthetic pesticides or herbicides that could contaminate the final oil. This is the product that carries the full biological potential we have been discussing. It is widely available online and in health food stores, and it is not expensive. A bottle that will last weeks or months typically costs between $15 and $25. The application itself should be intentional, unhurried, and consistent. Warm a small amount. A teaspoon is generally sufficient for a focused area like the knees or lower back, between your palms for 30 seconds. This is important. Warming the oil slightly opens the skin's pores and increases transdermal absorption. Apply it to the area with slow, circular massage movements, working from the periphery toward the center of the body, which follows the natural direction of lymphatic flow. Spend 2 to 3 minutes per area. Allow the oil to absorb fully, or cover the area loosely with a piece of flannel or an old cotton cloth to prevent staining your bed sheets and to help maintain the warmth that enhances absorption. For whole body benefit, particularly for those managing systemic inflammation, applying castor oil to the abdomen over the liver and intestinal region before sleep has been used traditionally and is now gaining renewed interest in functional medicine as a way to support digestive and immune health systemically. Consistency is the secret the calendar holds. One application will give you curiosity. 2 weeks of nightly application will begin to give you results. 1 month will give you a new baseline. 3 months will give you a different body, a quieter one, a less reactive one, a one that moves through the morning with less of that terrible stiffness, that deep morning ache, that sense of dragging the night behind you into the day. I want to close tonight with something that I think matters more than any specific fact I have shared with you. I want to close with the idea of agency, the word that means you have power here. Because one of the most insidious things that chronic pain and chronic inflammation do to a person, beyond the physical suffering, beyond the disrupted sleep, beyond the limitations on movement and activity, is what they do to the spirit. They create a feeling of helplessness, a sense that the body has become something that happens to you rather than something you inhabit and shape. That healing is something doctors do to you rather than something you participate in. That the years ahead will simply be a management of decline rather than a continued experience of vitality and discovery. That story is not true. It has never been true. And the science of what we now understand about inflammation, about the skin, about the lymphatic system, about the nervous system and sleep and the cardiovascular system, all of it points toward the same conclusion. The body, at any age, retains an extraordinary capacity for healing. The conditions under which that healing occurs can be nurtured. They can be tended. They can be improved, night by night, choice by choice, ritual by ritual. You are not a passive recipient of whatever biology decides to do. You are an active participant in your own physiology. The woman who massages warm oil into her aching knees before she sleeps is not doing something small. She is sending a message to every cell in her body: I am paying attention. I am here. I am choosing healing. And the body, that ancient, intelligent, responsive system that has carried you through every decade of your life, hears that message. It responds to that message. Because that is what it was always designed to do. What you do tonight in those quiet minutes before sleep, before the world goes dark and the healing begins, that is not nothing. That may be everything.